I just realised, Jay, I don't think you can see me dancing when the theme music plays, can you?
I can't. No. Can you see me dancing?
I can see if you do it. Yeah. So there you go. Now people watching know that we dance when when the
Absolutely.
Theme plays.
What a theme tune!
What a theme tune! What a theme tune! Anyway, good evening. Or whenever you're watching it, could be anyone, I guess. And welcome to We Need to Talk About Sunday, where we talk about what happened on Sunday at Romsey Methodist Church. Usually looking at like last Sunday's service, but we're a couple of weeks behind, so we're gonna maybe talk about two services. We're gonna be a bit lazier this evening, a bit more chatty, because we've not got a preacher with us, it's just us two.
We're easing back in from the summer break.
Easing back in, I'm sat down. That's I'm taking it easy after my reason I wasn't able to do the We Talk About Sunday live, even more live than usual for climate change, was because that week had got out of hospital from having a dicky heart, and I need to take it a bit easy. So I'm sat instead of at the standing desk, and I really don't like it. I do not like sitting down to work anymore. I can't do it.
I love it. I specifically chose an instrument where you have to sit at it.
Excellent. And the title of this evening's episode is Joe's officially joined the club, because 2 Sundays ago, we did decide 2 Sundays ago, but you became a member. You were inducted into the Methodist Church. Did you got your little membership card?
I did get my little membership card. It's up on the bookshelf. Yes, I'm now Gareth certified.
Gareth certified. So I thought we could chat about that a bit first.
Yep.
And I thought I'm going to ask you the questions, I guess, on that respect. And ask what made you decide to become a member at Romsey Methodist Church, and why now?
I'm not sure I'll give a great answer to this, to be fair. But I suppose Heather and I have been Heather obviously for years has been part of Romsey Methodist for a long time. And obviously since we've moved back to Romsey together, we've moved into Romsey Methodist Church, and we've done a lot with the church there, and kind of wanted to make things official. I felt like I didn't want to be sat on the sidelines. I was kind of keen to get involved. So for me, that's kind of why I made the big step, because I want to make sure that the church knew that I was sort of willing to give everything that I could to the church in the right ways, sort of thing. And becoming a member seemed to be the best way to do that. And obviously, because it was covenant service, that's kind of a big reason why we ended up having a cohort of a few of us getting inducted. So yeah.
Actually, that's a good point. It's interesting you mentioned that, because being the covenant service, it's one of those weirdly Methodist things. It's great, and I really like that we do it. But I'm kind of the point of it, I guess, is like it's about who we are, and it's about what we do, and it's kind of like a declaration from the church, isn't it? Of that this is who we are, this is what we do. And I think it's really interesting that you should become a member at that point, because that you get that kind of double whammy, I guess, of what that means. Just curious, because obviously you've been part of other churches, and I know that the way Methodism does membership is not necessarily normal. What was it like in the churches you're at before? How did that kind of thing work?
Well, I was baptized as a baby, so I don't really remember that. And kind of that was an Anglican church. Came out, and was brought up in an Anglican church and did Sunday school then. But when I moved to my secondary school, it was built onto a monastery, so I was part of my secondary school was full on Catholic. But at that time, as an Anglican in the Catholic Church, there were a bunch of us Anglicans that got confirmed together. And I want to say that was maybe about year 10 or 11. I think it was year 10. However old I am then. I don't know the years. I get confused between how I don't even know how old I am. I said it on the radio once that I was 23 and I was about 28 or something ridiculous. I don't even know how old I am now. 28, 27? I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, but I then got confirmed and then kind of drifted away after that as I kind of went to university, but then came back into it with when Heather and I looked for a church together, and we just found Portswood because that's where we were living at the time, and that was a free church. And I think for that time of my life when I wasn't looking to sort of be squeezed of everything that I could give, because I'd done a lot of that at my Catholic church. You know, I'd been there every Sunday performing, as part of the choir. And it was a lot of hard work for a long time. So I think that when we joined Portswood Church, and it was quite free, and it was quite relaxed, it was quite different to what I'd sort of been brought up with during that period. It was exactly what I was looking for from church at that time, which was good. But then we moved to Romsey, and this is kind of exactly what I was looking for as well from church. And I also felt like there was stuff that I could offer, and I think that's important. I don't know. I do see church, and this is very personal to me, but I do see church as a good sort of give and take. I do think that you can't just expect to sit back and let church wash you with everything that it's got, and not expect to sort of be needed in some way, and not give in some way. But equally, I think that it's important not to just be slogging away at church and not feeling as though you're getting something back in some way. And it could be complete. I mean, that's, as I say, that's completely personal to me. Maybe some people feel differently, but for me, that's what I think. I think there's things that I offer, but also there's things that I really sort of value from being at church. I don't know, that felt like a very long answer, but I don't know if that was a good answer.
It's good. It was good. It was helpful and interesting to know. I don't know if we've talked about your kind of background on here.
Sure.
I think people find that interesting.
Yeah.
At Romsey. Thank you. Cool.
I was going to, because we were obviously thinking about covenant as well, I was going to sort of ask what your thoughts were, Jace, in terms of this idea of covenant being, it's a big tradition, particularly in the Methodist Church. Of it's what we declare, it's what we the promises that we make every year. This idea of sort of what is tradition versus maybe some things that might end up being sort of quite outdated. And I don't mean that I'm not saying that I think that covenant is outdated. I'm just saying that there are plenty of churchy things that might be construed as sort of not moving with the times. I mean, music's come on. We've kind of and other aspects of church services have come on as well. But there are some moments. Obviously, covenant is a big moment. But I was also thinking about this from sort of communion point of view as well. Mm-hmm. It's a very sort of traditional thing that we do as a church. I just wonder what you thought about that. Do you see it being any different?
I was talking with Megan earlier about tradition, and it's a. Sometimes we talk about tradition, and it's just a code word for old, isn't it? And then sometimes we talk about tradition properly, and this is something that we have we've decided is good to keep doing because it is inherently good, and I think covenant is one of those interesting ones because we had that what was the hymn? I'm going to look it up.
There were 5 of them.
One that we always
or 6
have.
I can't remember.
There's that Wesley one that we always have at covenant services. That's very old and very traditional.
Right.
But the language perhaps not the most accessible in the world. And I think that's because the liturgy is quite good, like what we say, the promise that we make, the words that the minister kind of the prayers, etc. I think I'm not a huge fan of liturgy, if I'm honest. That kind of liturgy just doesn't really kind of do it for me. But in that context, I kind of get it, and I quite appreciate it for a covenant. But in the sense of tradition, there's that thing of if it's good and it like you keep it, don't you? Like if it's good, you keep doing it. But equally, our task is to make sure that it's relevant, you know, and we translate it to the next generation, etc., etc. And that's the challenge of where do you say, well, actually, yeah, there's still value in this, but not necessarily doing this bit this way at the same time. Because obviously in a covenant, so you know, any hymns you want, can't you? And they can be as modern or old as you like. It doesn't really you know, what's important is what's said and what's sung, and that God is worshipped, isn't it?
So I guess the question is when is tradition sort of broken? You know, like where's the line between tradition that is good for us to be reminded? I'm thinking specifically like communion. Like when is it blasphemous to split a croissant with someone and say the body of Christ, you know, or have a naan bread and pray over a naan bread together? You know, is that, you know, is that tradition, or is that?
It's funny. Do you know what? It's funny you should say that. I remember when I got to do I got to lead a communion service once, but not actually do the communion bit because I'm not a minister. But it was Easter. And we did do that. We had naan bread. We had lots of different breads from all around the world to kind of help remind us that it's not just our culture doing this in this way, especially on like Easter Sunday morning. You know, billions of people around the world doing this same thing, kind of a bit like us, but not in the same way. And yes, some people were a bit sort of, well, have I got a piece of rye bread for communion? But it was really interesting, and I think it opened up some conversation that was nice.
Yeah.
But it is, I do communions on these things of when you read about it in the New Testament versus kind of how we do it and what we do now. It's very different, isn't it? You know, from having this kind of banquet on a Sunday morning, or a meal, sharing a meal together of a Sunday morning, which is what it kind of starts out as, versus, you know, the little thimble full of bread and wine. And the symbolism has become more important than the act itself. But that's one of those times when you need to be very careful and make sure that you've got the symbolism right, I guess. And I think we have in communion. It speaks to people, and if it wasn't helpful, we wouldn't keep doing it in that way. Really. But covenant, I do think, is one of those things where actually, because it's this very Methodist tradition, we look at it with slightly, oh, well, we do this, and so we'll do it the same way we did last time, without actually being able to, without actually assessing it with clarity and saying, well, actually, this perhaps we don't sing that hymn, or perhaps we have, or perhaps we make it more accessible somehow. Because the danger is that you keep doing what you were doing. But all the meaning is lost because no one understands it anymore. And I remember once I was in St Paul's Cathedral, and they were having Eucharist communion, and I I sort of sat down and observed, being a Methodist preacher, and I looked at it and thought, I do not understand what is going on here. Like, why is he holding that smoking thing, and why are there these three people up and down? And I just didn't. It didn't.
Yeah.
And I'm a Christian, and I like to think of reasonably broad horizon Christian. I don't think it should have been that. I would have thought it should have been obvious what was going on and what everything meant, but it just wasn't, and it wasn't explained either. And that's the danger, that for anyone else that was in there, it was meaningless.
I think you're right, is that this sort of idea of symbolism and tradition, whatever we want to call it, it's got to be understood. I think that's it, is that if people as the congregation aren't understanding what's going on, then you've got to ask the question of what's the point of it. But if you think that people are getting the meaning of why we're doing something and why we put so much emphasis on communion, or the promises that we make as part of covenant, which I think Gareth did beautifully to sort of, explained why we were doing covenant and why it matters, sort of thing, and why we sort of commit to making those promises. I think it's a good question to sort of continually ask as a church, I suppose.
Yes, and I guess the funny things of that is we wouldn't dream of, certainly in our church, we wouldn't dream of using a version of the Bible that was around in 1730, whatever.
Sure.
But a hymn that was around in 1730, whatever. Fine.
Yeah.
You sort of think,
Sure.
well, we've made the decision to make sure that we present our faith in an understandable way, in language that is accessible. And then, of course, we have in Methodism, a great tradition of our theology is in hymns, because maybe at the time people couldn't read, etc. But now it's gone like completely the other way, that the theology in hymns often is completely inaccessible to a lot of people. But we've got this brilliant Bible that's well translated and modern and being kept up to date. And it's just sort of ironic, I guess.
Yeah.
So moving on, kind of, I guess. There's a couple of things that Gareth mentioned in that service that I thought were quite interesting that we might want to sort of touch on. One of the things that stood out to me was Gareth mentioned he sort of mentioned Welsh rugby without mentioning Welsh rugby, which I thought was it's very cleverly worded. If anyone watches that back, that was very well done. But Gareth mentioned sort of being fanatical about sports teams, and how that's like normal, and super sports fans will kind of squeeze their favorite team into every conversation. They'll always tell you about what happened in the last game and that kind of thing. And you kind of, you get that they live and breathe this insert ball sport here kind of thing. But do we as Christians kind of have that same attitude towards our faith, which is supposedly such a huge, exciting, important part of our lives, that we go away kind of talking about, what happened on Sunday? And I thought it was an interesting challenge in terms of attitude. I don't know what you think.
I just as soon as you sort of said fanatical, and do we come out of Sunday like that, I was my instant thought was, well, thank goodness we've got Sandra Timms this Sunday.
Excellent.
She is just absolutely wonderful at sort of unashamedly sort of just professing her faith to anyone who comes within a meter of her. Which I think is amazing. I think that, well, certainly for me, it feels like a challenge, because it's something that I'm far too British, in a lot of ways, to sort of feel comfortable just splurging. Quite happy to sort of tell people, I'm doing this podcast thing, and it's going to have conversations about our world and things like that. But sometimes it's hard to come out of church on a Sunday sort of skipping down the road
but that I think is a question we need to ask ourselves, I guess. So what I sort of find really, so for me, often when I look at, I always kind of come back to God created us to be the way that we are for a reason, and that naturally what we are, we sort of have tendencies towards our reflections of what God intended for us, and the divine nature of God, depending on what we're talking about. In the case of like those sports fans, like thinking of someone who's got like a full body tattoo of their favorite footballer, which isn't unusual, that maybe that is the way that we are meant to feel about God, and that in that person's life, that is where that energy is being directed. But that is the kind of energy that we should sort of seek to, maybe we can't all be like, maybe we can't all be as energetic as Sandra, but what to kind of try and understand that, and to be a fan and not just a follower, I guess.
Yeah, I wrote down 5 words 4 points really that Gareth said under that, and it was from Hebrews 10, and he specifically pulled out verse 22 as drawing near to God. And he said that that invitation should be joyful, glad, and fully committed. And I did sort of think, how often do we step out of church on a Sunday and think, okay, I'm fully joyful, fully committed, and fully glad, sort of it was a nice message to sort of feel quite challenged by, I think.
And a question for us as a church, for me, for the leadership team, to why not, and why isn't that the case?
Yeah.
And a question for all of us, because one of the other points that Gareth made is that we all have a responsibility for each other's spiritual growth.
Yeah.
Which kind of comes up and it came up in the in the promise that we make. So when you made your promises and became a member of the church, obviously the church makes a promise about that we're going to be a place that we can nurture faith in. I've not got the exact wording, but I did have it up on the screen a couple of podcast episodes ago, because I talked about that at length in my service. But that if we think there's something that we're not very good at, we don't just kind of grumble about it. It's up to all of us to kind of see what we can do to help pitch in and sort it out. And like you said about becoming a member, you want to commit and give and do something for God, but in the context of our church. And
I don't think that church should be viewed as something that we go along to and is done to us. I don't think that church should be done to us. We're not called to be just spectators, to just sort of sit on the seat and go, that was nice, see you again next week, sort of thing. I think it's about, yes, that there's an element of sort of getting together and learning together and sort of Gareth said that we're that by coming together on a Sunday together, and especially as Covenant, if you think about that happening throughout the world, everyone that is making those sorts of statements at the same time, that is important to sort of know that at that time we are all belonging to something bigger than just Romsey Methodist Church, or even just Romsey. We are part of something that is international. And I think he put it beautifully, intergalactic. When we walk through the doors on a Sunday morning, not that it's just exclusively on a Sunday morning, but obviously when we are there, we are sort of invited into something special. And hopefully we sort of,
I just realised I didn't do my obligatory, if you've got a question or want to mention anything, etc., do drop it in the chat. I apologise. Do drop anything in the chat. Say we're keeping an eye on it, or email me. I would do that every week and say email me, and no one ever emails me. I said that last time, then someone just sent me an email to say hi. But yeah. Anyway,
great.
So moving kind of then on to the next service, because we had Peter on this Sunday. Peter, oh my goodness, my brain just died.
Castle. Peter Castle?
Thank you. Peter Castle, yes. Dreadful.
He's not with us this week because I believe he's gone up to the Shetland Islands. Is that GDPR or something?
Something like that. He's somewhere that isn't in either of these rooms.
Oops. You can tell that I work as a self-employed person. It doesn't have to worry about this sort of thing.
Deary me. But yes, I thought we could. There were some interesting points that came up that I thought, again, we could discuss, much like this service. And I thought it was the thing I thought was most interesting was how well, actually, because it's the first of a series, we're going to be looking at James. I would say over a few weeks, but it's going to be interspersed, because we've kind of got two themes on the trot at the minute. We're going to have James, and we're going to have sort of going through each chapter of the book of James, and we're going to have women of the Bible. And so Sandra is going to be leading us on that series. And the reason why it's kind of chopped and up all over the place is because we really wanted to make sure that the Women of the Bible services were led by women, and so we made sure to plan those when we could have a female preacher come and lead us, and make sure that it's, you know, not a man mansplaining women of the Bible, because that's maybe not great. So that's exciting, actually, and it will mean we get to switch it up every other week at the minute. So that'd be cool. But yeah, so first of James, and the first thing I thought was really interesting was how well the two services kind of gelled together. That Peter kind of carries on a lot of the same themes. That you kind of go from that, like, respond, you know, Gareth talking about responding to God and then going and doing something, which I said is kind of a little bit unique about the Covenant service. That's what we do. We go and do stuff because of what God has done and is for us. And then obviously Peter kind of really picked that up in James, that yeah, we don't just listen and talk and whatever, we go and we do. Yeah,
I thought it was an interesting point when he sort of mentioned that we should listen to the world and not just do what the world wants. I thought that was an interesting sort of I guess, because in light of what's coming up with the COP26 and just you know, everything that we've been speaking about in terms of environmentally as well. But I thought it was just a really interesting point. Obviously, listening to God, but listening to the world and sort of responding to what it needs rather than rather than doing what the world wants to do, which feels like a very sort of human thing, I think.
Well, again, I think to an extent, climate change is perhaps a really good example of that. So at one point, that was really a niche, unpopular opinion, wasn't it? It was kind of, well, you know, society wasn't really bothered. It took a lot of effort to make not enough people bothered still, frankly. And I think that's a good example of that. And I think it's a good example, a good way of us understanding it as Christians, that we don't. There's a lot. I'm thinking about things like cancel culture and that kind of thing, and all the kind of what's the best way to put it? Hostile kind of conversation that happens. That when we don't do that. But it's kind of Peter kind of flagged up and kind of said about, you know, the danger of producing more heat than light, didn't he? I thought it was a good analogy, that we can get caught up in like debates and arguments and go nowhere and not actually speak truth or do good.
I mean, he also mentioned obviously about sort of the importance of sort of repetition of the message and the Bible and sort of surrounding ourselves with that, and the importance of just hearing it again and again. I mean, he just sort of said, well, how much do you remember from last week's service? How much do you remember from the service before that? And shockingly little, until I check my notes, you know, how much I remember, and then I go, oh yeah, okay, fine, right.
But that's why we're here. See,
exactly. Yeah. So well done. Service, if you're watching this, you've done your homework. But I thought it was also a really interesting point that he sort of mentioned about when praying for each other, this idea of sort of for that being genuine rather than just an opportunity for gossip. I don't think that we're likely to sort of have, you know, where we would have a prayer group that would get together just for the gossip's sake, really. But I do think that I mean, I think we're in a church where people do care for each other genuinely, but I do think that sort of catching yourself on gossiping as a thing is a good thing to do, because it's so easy to, you know, I even said to you, Jason, before we started, you know, why does gossiping feel so good? You know, why is it, you know, how I was going to ask how we sort of stay on the straight and narrow, avoid that temptation of gossiping. Any ideas? How would you?
I don't know, because there's a difference between kind of sharing information that is relevant and helpful, like even past like a pastoral situation. Like as a church, we care for people. We want to know how people are doing, and so actually I think we should be more open with each other, and we have conversations. We're a family, we're a church family. And like you'd have conversations with your family that you wouldn't have with co-workers or strangers or whatever. You kind of, and I think that the key then is that doesn't turn into judgment or anything unholy in that sense. But I think it's a tricky one, and I think in reality it's not. I think if you're mindful, not gossiping, certainly in a harmful way, is not that difficult. I think the problem is actually that we're not very good at praying. Like when Peter mentioned at the prayer meeting, that we just aren't very good at doing that together in a helpful way. I don't know what the answer is, but because I was thinking about it, because the alternative is like occasionally our prayers of intercessions, which turn into a lecture.
Sure.
Like we had one a while back where our prayers of intercessions literally had a PowerPoint slide of statistics, and you think, well, okay, is that helping me to actually connect with God in this moment? And maybe it does for some people, maybe it's just me, but I think we could do with kind of being more intentional with our prayers, I guess. It's not just an opportunity to say stuff for the sake of saying stuff.
I guess that's exactly what Peter was sort of saying is check yourself, in those moments. And I think, he was talking sort of specifically about sort of when praying for others, really. I just, I just thought it's good to be mindful of those sorts of things, I think. Particularly, I think I don't know. Maybe I am just. I find it very easy to sort of slip into it. I think because it can be sort of just. It can be very. It can be very innocent to begin with, and yet it sort of spirals out of control. We all have times where we kind of speak to, we speak about work colleagues or whatever, and do you remember when this person did this, that, and the other, and how it can sort of easily spiral out of control. And I think that it's then sort of going, well, are we trying to be genuine here, or is this just an opportunity to sort of fuel that?
Yeah, and are we? Because I guess in the context of James, it's very much within the church in that sense, and so when we're all responsible for each other's spiritual well-being, as Gareth said, or spiritual growth, how is gossiping helpful to someone else's spiritual? Well, it isn't, and we are not being, and we are, it's like I say, we're family, and we're called to be, we are, I think part of our role is to be advocates for each other as well, to give people the benefit of the doubt. There's a great there's a phrase, isn't there, assume positive intent, which of course we should do in the church. Hopefully, we all stand up and we make that, when we become a member, we make the promises that we make and that kind of thing. So like we're all trying to do our best, and so actually if we're being gossiping and being disingenuous and judgmental and that kind of thing, then we're not being what we should be. But it's hard. I remember reading something about it's like psychologically it's very rewarding gossiping, and so it's kind of it's so easy because your brain kind of likes you doing it.
Sure.
But it also likes, I don't know, hard drugs, and you shouldn't give your brain hard drugs either. So so yeah. And on that note, because I've just one of the other things that Peter kind of mentioned was we are saints. not all, members or supporters of Southampton Football Club, but actual real saints, which I don't know, if you've come from a Catholic background, might sound weirder.
Yeah, I have to say, I didn't
Then-
sort of. I didn't feel like, oh yeah, I've earned that.
Oh my goodness, yeah. Well, thank goodness we don't get what we've earned.
Well, that's true. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's interesting. I mean, I
Yeah.
think for me that I try and remember that. I think it's a great reminder of who we are and how our identity is rooted in Christ. And I guess you've kind of got, it's unhelpful a bit that you've got in the Catholic Church that kind of reverence for saints and that kind of historic stuff with it. But in terms of how saints are talked about in the Bible, if you look back and then apply that to us, then actually I think that's quite affirming and really helpful and a good way of understanding. I think it's quite easy to read through the New Testament and kind of, because of that history of the word saint, you kind of read it and be like, oh well, that's not talking about me. But no, it is. That's exactly what it means in the same way as somewhere else when they're talking about brothers and sisters. Yeah, that's you. or whatever. Yeah, I think that's really helpful to remember. And in that context of sort of you talking about gossip, of one of the things to remember, is this saintly behavior.
Yeah.
Because it's a phrase we use, isn't it? Oh, they're such a saint, and that kind of thing. And you want that to be applied to you, us.
Yeah. So there you go. That was that was a speedy recap through both weeks.
2 weeks. We missed lots, but I think we covered off a good few points.
Hopefully we'll be back again next week or perhaps the week after. We'll just have to wait and see. But
maybe next time. I mean, I think so far we've had 2 people watch, so I might have forgotten to send around an email saying we're actually doing this evening. But it's here. It's on YouTube. People can join in and watch.
Here to stay now.
It's here.
Cool.
And thank you for those that have enjoyed watching and stuck with us through our ramblings. And yes, we must have a chat with Sandra, and so she'll be happy to come on because Sandra's a fab guest to have on.
Fanatical.
Yes.
About Jesus.
Fanatical. No, I do. I love the way she talks about Jesus. It is so it's lovely.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll have her on. And should we pray and
let's pray
and go?
Yeah.
Ooh, what should I pray about? Oh yeah, stuff. Father God, tonight I am thankful for the reminder that we are saints. We are your holy people, and I pray that will be forefront of our minds. That will be something that we hold on to be a part of our identity, to help us choose to be the kind of people that you want us to be. Amen.
Wonderful. Thanks for watching, folks, and we will see you again shortly.